AI, artificial intelligence, taking such a huge leap beginning from earlier this year. Of course, artificial intelligence has been developing throughout the decades, but this is another revolutionary time, it seems. So how is the forum looking at these latest trends and see where it is in the overall map of where our world is?
We look at this kind of at three levels. One is there needs to be some guardrails in place, some things that we shouldn't try to do with AI, areas that we shouldn't apply it. Then behind that you actually have governance. So we actually need, how does, I don't want to say regulations, but what are the principles, the design principles which we should build AI to make sure that we remove biases, that the data we use is appropriate, different principles that go into this. And last area is guidelines. What does it look like inside an organization? For example, we have our own employees that, we said, okay, let's experiment with this, but let's always declare if you've used it, right? So we don't ever confuse where it was applied or not applied, so we keep track of that. And so if you have these guardrails, governance, and guidelines, they're kind of different layers of engagement with the AI. I think this will be an important element. The other area that we've been working on is actually to bring leaders together then to explicitly discuss that. Okay, so how do we align on what those practices are? So we have the large tech companies that have the largest LLMs and have made these investments, but we also have academics and experts. And then we're bringing in perspectives from civil society, digital safety experts, and so on, and sharing and exchanging ideas. And this is something that you'll be able to see more in the next 6 months as we continue those discussions.
Now on social media we see so much biases, so much false information and fake news and propaganda. And people are taking advantage of technologies for not exactly the right purpose.
You do need some safeguards, as I said, guardrails in there. Many of the social media things, that's just largely responsibility of the companies. There are mechanisms that you can do, but you actually need to make an investment. If you don't make the investment, either in software tools, human tools, you don't have principles inside the company. So there are platforms that are managing well without that. But I'd like to look maybe beyond social media. So if you think of where these technologies are being applied now, let me give you 3 examples. Agriculture, healthcare, and education. Right, so in agriculture now, you take a country like India, over half the population still works in agriculture. 85% of those individuals are smallholder farmers. So they don't have these large farms that you'll see in the US or China. They actually have very small farmers. The farmers are working directly there. Now on a smartphone, they can actually get their weather reports, data update. They can do soil monitoring, have sensors on the ground that are low cost. They use drones for the application of chemicals, monitoring for different elements, and even using satellite technology to have a high-level view of the ground. The falling cost of all those technologies made it accessible to a farmer to actually help them improve their yield, reduce their water usage, reduce the use of pesticides, increase their time to market. And those tools now become accessible to an entire population globally. It'll actually help us address some of the food security challenges. And you can see similar approaches in healthcare and education. And so I recognize this interest in social media. There is a lot of noise there. There's also a lot of these other areas, though, that we see very positive benefits from technology to society.
Usually we go black or white, the social debate usually tend to be that way, but what is the right balance?
It's bringing that transparency into the discussion and actually having a discussion, right? So if someone goes off by themselves and just starts building a technology, doesn't check in, test their assumptions, test the use cases, we will end up with challenges. And the reality is that the technology will move faster than the regulation. So we can't rely on only regulation. And this is where I come back to the guidelines and principles that should be in place. And by establishing those guidelines in dialogue with not only individuals from a given industry sector, but across sectors, bring them in from different national geographical perspectives, bring them from different sectors of society. This is really important in designing the principles to ensure that we can avoid some of the potential damages
Right.
and also fully benefit from the opportunities.
With geopolitics as the biggest backdrop that we have to face today, Jeremy, where do you think the real thing gonna happen? Is it going to happen with government's leadership, or we civil society, or business community, or media just have to work on our own in order to create something, one group, another group, without necessarily as an overall big picture for everyone?
It depends on the country. It depends on the countries. There's always been competition. Competition's healthy, right? It actually drives change, can drive progress.
As long as it's not rivalry.
Exactly, right? So you need a balance between strategic competition and strategic cooperation. And if you look at the number of issues where technology can benefit us in cooperation, so if I come back to the climate example, right? We live in a shared climate. Fires don't know borders, droughts don't know borders, temperature rise has no borders. So we will need to actively collaborate on these areas. And technology is one of those cases where if we think about sharing data across borders, there's recently been this move to, every country wants to keep all their data inside, yet...
And every city wants to keep their own data. Yes. Every little county wants to keep their own little data.
Yeah. But these LLMs and generative AI, they work best the larger the data set, right? And then you also can reduce the number of biases that are in there because your data set is too small or too narrow. So I do see positive progress here on data sharing mechanisms. There's informal discussions underway where we'll likely end up with maybe more plurilateral discussions rather than multilateral. It doesn't mean we'll have everybody agreeing, but if you have a few key actors, Europe, China, North America, some other key regions. And then what we need to do is we also make sure that we bring the developing countries into those conversations.
South, so to speak.
Yes. And there we also have to be cautious about over-regulating, because in many of these countries, the companies don't necessarily have the resources to pursue all the rules and regulations and adapt to each country environment. So I think it is really important that we do have discussions around the principles, how we open it up to as large an audience as possible. But I think government has an important role to play here.
But on the other hand, Jeremy, how to make sure, or can we help to make sure, that technologies will not be used as a geopolitical tool?
Yeah, you can imagine a couple critical technologies, right? So we've got AI, we've got satellite technologies, we've got quantum computing, synthetic biology, space tech, and I would put cybersecurity into that mix as well. We'd probably even go a step further and think around some of the climate technologies that we're doing there. Each of those will see competition in, it's natural, but we also have to find out, okay, within that technology domain, also what's the cooperation, how do we make sure the benefits are? No matter what country you're in, you also want to make sure you can fully harness the benefits of those technologies for your citizens. Right, and it doesn't matter the country, that should be one of the first objectives. The countries that do that, they use those technologies effectively for their citizens, that becomes a competitive advantage. And so I think it'll be challenging. It's not, I don't think there's a magic bullet, but one of the most important things we can do is actually by sitting down, exchanging, sharing. We have so many guests coming and join us here in Tianjin. I think we have 90 different countries represented with us at the summit here, among 1,500 participants. That kind of informal exchange and just building understanding is one of the first steps to help address these issues. It's not enough, but it's a good part to actually just build basic levels of trust and understanding, even if there is a continued disagreement.
How do you see the synergy being built among different sectors in terms of scientific research and tech research? Because some of them will bring us a future that we could ever imagined, So I think a lot of people are fascinated by this. What are some of the trends you are looking at right now?
Yeah, so, one of the areas I'm quite interested in now is the energy transition.
Yes.
And if you look at the contribution that's made by China in this space, if you go back when we first met, the price of solar panels has fallen 90%. We won't ask people to figure out how long ago that was, right? But it's a relatively rapid fall of the price in solar panels. Now what that did is open up access to entirely new areas. And wind is on a similar curve. Now we go into the next stage and they say, okay, well, what happens on batteries? And you have two of the largest battery manufacturers in the world here in China with CATL and BYD. And now that synthesis of knowledge, right? So you have material science, you have engineering, you have physics, you have chemistry. Now you start applying mathematics, you start using AI to design new models.
Yes.
Now, through the application of all these technologies, we'll actually have the ability to have batteries that can run for much longer distances in passenger vehicles, large trucks, buses, and actually reduce the utilization of coal and gases. I don't think we'll completely get away from using oil, but we probably shouldn't be using it for transport. We can actually have better alternatives. So this kind of synthesis of leading edge knowledge in each of these domains actually comes together in a product that enters every one of our daily lives and actually can improve the planet and climate at the same time.